We've been talking about this growth of Africa being, the story of Africa being a growth story, being a growth opportunity for companies. And people often ask the question, yes, the people are there, the market is there, it is growing. But do we have the skills to try and take advantage of all this attention that we're getting centered on Africa?
Look, I think we definitely do. I think, if you take a look at all the major metrics with regards to economic development, Africa has made massive strides in the last 10 years. I think, whether it be economic growth, whether it be monetary policy, regulatory reforms, everything is definitely moving forward. I think we are missing a trick, and where there is still a very big weakness as Africa, that is inter-regional trade. The skill of using each other and supporting on each other to develop the continent. I mean, we currently are thinking about 13% inter-regional trade versus Asia Pacific, which is at 39, and Eastern Europe, which is at 31. So skills-wise, we are gearing up, and I think overall, the continent is definitely gearing up to take advantage of some of the opportunity. But we still have a way to go. Yeah,
I've certainly seen figures suggesting that intra-regional trade between African states actually stands below 10%. So I suppose those figures will vary from time to time. But in terms of getting that intra-regional trade going on, where do you see the impetus to try and get that growing coming from?
Look, I think a lot of it is really around trying to get these trade unions and these custom unions effective. We have, I think, over a dozen of them active in Africa, but they're not very effective because, I mean, they have great difficulty practically applying some of the policies and the measures that they put in place in the first place. If we talk to some of our clients around expansion into Africa and cross-border trade, I mean, they cite the typical issues. It's logistics, it's tariffs that are quite high, bureaucracy, crime, and those things should be sorted out. Those things are addressable things that we can sort out at the regional level. Southern Africa is not doing too bad with the SADC. Eastern Africa, I think, is doing well as well, but the West and the North has quite a long way to go still. Yeah, so people speak about this huge opportunity, but I suppose the bigger question for someone, let's say, who's sitting outside the continent, maybe say in Beijing or in Washington or wherever they could be, would be this opportunity that we see now. Just how sustainable is it, particularly given the volatility we know that swirls around African politics and economies and general regulation? I think we're definitely seeing a new Africa story developing over the last 10 years. I think a lot of the growth in the past has been based on resources. And the extractive industries are not very sustainable when it comes to growth. We're seeing a lot more diversification in economies in general. And like I said earlier, I think if you take a look at all the major indicators, for Africa in particular, the country is really moving forward in a very big way. Particular examples around financing is increasing. We deal a lot with private equity, corporate finance and structured finance, and I think in the last 15 or 20 meetings I've had, only 2 companies said that they don't have an approach or a strategy for Africa, and they don't have plans of expanding into Africa. So I think a lot of the fundamental problems that we face are being addressed, and are being addressed at a much quicker rate than we've seen in the 80s and the 90s. So if you're advising, say, an investor who's sitting somewhere in Accra and looking at us now and watching the show and thinking, so what would be the major risks to investing onto the continent? What sort of key challenges would you identify for a would-be investor? How long is your show? Look, I think apart from the usual suspects, around things like logistics and finance, I think a big challenge for a lot of companies is really the diversity of the continent. We've got 54 countries, we've got 1,500 languages, God knows how many religions. The diversity on the continent is a very big thing and a very difficult thing for companies in general to address. Africa is often viewed as a continent when it comes to market entry, but really, the 54 countries is what you want to take a look at individually. Yeah. Other factors would be things like, the sheer size of the continent. I saw a picture the other day where they grouped the US, Europe, India, China, Argentina, and New Zealand into the landmass of Africa. Yeah. Other things that we typically come up with as well as time frame. Right. It's very difficult to determine return on investment in Africa due to the longer time frames it typically takes to take advantage of addressable markets. So even though you've identified particular opportunities, taking advantage of those opportunities takes longer because of the operational challenges we face on the ground, which makes your calculations around return on investment quite difficult. And yeah, I mean, I can mention quite a number more, but those are some of the main ones, apart from the usual suspects, as I said.
No, sure. You spoke earlier on about a new Africa. What defines this new Africa? And give us perhaps some examples of where this is.
Look, I think for the first time, we're definitely very confident that Africa is starting to cement its place in the global economy. One of the most positive things we found is that the trade with the BRICS countries, so i.e. the economic engines of the world, is increasing and increasing drastically as well. I think we're currently at around 20% trade-wise with BRICS countries, and that figure is expected to move up to about 50% by the year 2030. And what is good about the alignment with some of the big countries is they've got a tendency of sticking around. A lot of the investment and a lot of the interest from the West is still arm's length, still through third parties.
Sure.
Where the BRICS countries are actually investing in manufacturing. They've been investing in infrastructure, and they're taking advantage of some of the local entrepreneurial opportunities as well. I'd like to see some of the statistics around the number of Chinese nationals 10 years ago versus now, but it's substantial.
Absolutely. Hendrick Malan, Operations Director for Africa at Frost Sullivan. Thank you for joining us this evening.